Did you know that there was a black passenger on the Titanic? A lot of people don't know that. Some people who do know talk about a black family that traveled on the Titanic, and that's just not the case. There was Joseph LaRoche, his white French wife, and two biracial daughters. The distinction is important because class mattered as much as when getting on the Titanic as when getting off of it in 1912. And that's if you were one of the ones who was lucky enough to make it off of the Titanic into a lifeboat. So it is highly likely that part of the reason that Mrs. LaRoche was able to make it to safety into a lifeboat with her two daughters is because to the naked eye, they were all just three white females who didn't appear to be black. To any of the crew members who were just helping passengers get off of the Titanic before she sank, Mrs. LaRoche was just a second-class passenger with two white daughters. Another reason that it is important to make the distinction that Joseph LaRoche's family was not a black family, but a mixed-race family, is that there would come a time when Mrs. LaRoche would literally bury every trace of blackness that was attached to her and her daughters through her husband. And that is something that a black woman with two black daughters simply would not have been able to do. Let's get into it.
But first, if you like these videos about the most scandalous stories from yesteryear that make Ty's Hot Mess History a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload one of these videos or every time that I live stream. And comment "I subscribed" in the comment section so that I can say hello to you. Now, on to why you are here. Around the time of the release of this story, it is the 111th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, which happened in April of 1912. And when the Titanic went down, so did its only black passenger on board, Joseph LaRoche. In the few places where I've seen his name regarding Titanic, most of the titles or headlines read something along the lines of "The Only Black Family on the Titanic," or "The Titanic's Only Black Family," something like that. While I can appreciate that people are telling the story of the LaRoche family, I think that knowing that the family was interracial and not black is important. In this 1912 setting, perception was reality, and class mattered. Even though Joseph LaRoche was a well-educated man from an influential family, the perception about him, because of his skin color, would have made it hard for his fellow Titanic passengers to believe that the background that he had really was his background. We'll get to that. The white and mixed identities of his wife and daughters respectively likely played a large role in their making it off of the Titanic and into a lifeboat. And the fact that his daughters were white passing, meaning that to the naked eye they looked like white children, who no one would second guess as being black or partially black, meant that the rest of his family could bury his black existence so that all of them, his wife and daughters, could live their lives as white women. Not only could they do that, they did, years after the Titanic sank. Again, perception was and is reality. Joseph's wife, Juliette Lafargue, was a white French woman. When the family traveled on the Titanic, the couple had two very young girls, toddlers, Simone and Louise, and Juliette was pregnant with a third child. It is actually because of their daughters that the couple chose to travel on the Titanic. Originally, Joseph's mother gifted them with first-class tickets for a steamship called La France, which had a rule that children had to be in the ship's nursery during meal times. But they traded in those first-class tickets for second-class tickets on the Titanic, because on the Titanic, their daughters could stay in their care all day long for the entire voyage. In case you are wondering how a black woman, Joseph's mother, could afford to purchase such an extravagant gift as first-class tickets on a cruise ship in 1912, let me give you a little background information on Joseph and his family. Joseph's mother, Anne LaRoche, and her side of the family. His great-great-grandfather was Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the leader of the Haitian Revolution who became the first ruler of an independent Haiti in 1805. His initial title was Governor General. That was later changed to Emperor Jacques I of Haiti. Well, that didn't last long because he was assassinated the very next year, in 1806. And also on Joseph LaRoche's mother's side of the family was Cincinnatus LeConte. He was Joseph's uncle and the president of Haiti at the time that the Titanic sailed. So, knowing how influential Joseph's family was makes it easy to understand why his mother was able to purchase those expensive tickets in 1912. And on his father's side, we find another surprise about Joseph and his daughters and his blackness. His daughters were not half black. Joseph LaRoche was half black because his father was white. Joseph LaRoche, a French army captain. Obviously, having this piece of the puzzle only further explains why Titanic crew members would have thought that Joseph's daughters were white when seeing them with their mother. They practically were white, but for some reason, there was a vested interest in removing all traces of blackness from Joseph's legacy. See this drawing of his family issued after the Titanic sank, and consider that none of the records from the White Star Line call him black, not of African descent or Haitian descent. He is only listed as French. Now, French is just a nationality, not a race, so there is a such thing as a black French person, but this drawing makes it clear that no one was supposed to read his name and think that he was black. Let's think in terms of modern-day celebrities to give ourselves a picture of what crew members saw when they saw Joseph LaRoche and his family. So, when someone is biracial with one white parent and one black one, they might appear to be only or mostly black, like Lenny Kravitz. They might clearly look equally white and black like Lisa Bonet, or they might look practically white like Rashida Jones. Based on the photo of Joseph LaRoche, he was more like Lenny Kravitz and looked black to people who saw him. That being said, genetics isn't just about looks, and most of the time, when a black and white biracial person procreates with a white person, the child or children look white. They are at least 75% white. Think of the rapper Drake, black and white biracial whose child's mother is white. If one saw his child, not knowing who the parents were, most people would probably assume that his child is white. Same for biracial reality TV personality Ashley Darby and her children. Same for Meghan Markle and her children with Prince Harry. So, when we take into consideration that Italians and Irish passengers on the Titanic faced open racial discrimination on their voyage, it isn't hard to imagine that Joseph LaRoche would have been dealt the same hand. Speaking of their voyage, here is how the LaRoche family spent their final night on the Titanic and their final night as an intact family of four. April 14th, 1912. After a day of socializing and dining with other second-class passengers and even some first-class passengers, the LaRoche family retired to their cabin for the evening. And just for the record, it's not surprising that Joseph and his family would have spent time with the first-class travelers. On Titanic, there were a number of common spaces that were shared by both first and second-class ticket holders. And to be clear, second class on the Titanic was first class on any other liner. Recall that Joseph traded in the first class tickets from his mother for the second class Titanic ticket. And because his family's cabin was so large, it was one of a number of second class cabins that were more luxurious than some first class rooms. But a few hours after the family was in for the night, none of that materialistic stuff would matter. At 11:40 p.m., the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg, and that was the beginning of the end. A steward came into the LaRoche family cabin and told them to put on their life jackets. Joseph woke up his wife and told her that the ship had been in an accident. He put all of their money in his coat pocket, along with all their valuables that were small enough to fit in there as well. Then he and his wife carried their daughters, who were both still asleep, to the top deck. Once there, a steward guided the family to the lifeboats. Joseph was fluent in English and French, his wife only French. So she was confused and had to wait for him to translate directions from the stewards every step of the way. At 12:25 a.m., an order was issued to start loading women and children into the few lifeboats that Titanic carried, which were only enough for less than a third of its souls on board. Joseph placed his coat, the one that contained everything they owned, onto his wife's shoulders. Then his wife and daughters all made it safely into a lifeboat. As their lifeboat was lowering, Joseph told his family in French, "I'll get another lifeboat. God be with you. I'll see you in New York." The last lifeboat was lowered from Titanic at 2:05 a.m. Approximately 15 minutes later, at 2:20 a.m., the ship snapped into two pieces and then sank into the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Just days before, more than 2,200 passengers and crew members had boarded the world's largest, most luxurious and unsinkable cruise ship. And then, just a few days later, at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, over 1,500 of those people were either still on that ship that was making its way to the bottom of the ocean or dying from hypothermia and asphyxia in the freezing waters. Joseph was one of them, dead at 26. His body, along with many others, was never recovered. Some of the wealthiest people in the world were on Titanic's maiden voyage, and many people learned on that final night of the voyage that all of the money in the world doesn't matter if you don't have the air in your lungs, if you don't have life. Unfortunately for Juliette LaRoche, she would have to learn that lesson in more than a metaphoric sense right after she was rescued by the Carpathia, because someone stole her coat with all of her worldly possessions, the one that Joseph placed on her shoulders. If you want the story of what happened to this family after the Titanic's sinking, let me know in the comments section. Joseph LaRoche had no control over his legacy and the fact that once he was discovered, he'd be known as a black man, not biracial like he was. But one woman who would never allow anyone to call her black was whorehouse owner Lulu White, a proud octoroon who was probably more black than she admitted. I published a video about her that you can see here. I will also leave a link in the description box. My sources for this story are Chrissy Hamlin on Blogspot and the Titanic Historical Society. Here's a big shout out to our friends at the Mall de Melanin, the online promotional site for over 100 businesses of black and brown ownership. Their shops feature clothing, jewelry, home decor, skin products, hair products, and products for your children and fur babies too. Mall de Melanin supports this channel, and they have something for you. Discount coupons for some of their merchants each month. Their link is below in the description box. Sign up and start receiving your discounts with these new brands today. This video has been brought to you by me. Well, my Patreon is a sponsor for this video. If you like these dirty scandals on my channel, then you'll love my Patreon, Ty's Too Hot Hot Mess History. It has all of the stuff that I can't talk about or show here because it's just too hot, too violent, too sexual, too graphic, too much. Come and join us there for the hot Hot Mess History. The link is in the description box.